Unprecedented scenes unfolded in America's capital city, Washington, on Wednesday, with violence, vandalism, tear gas, bullets being fired to quell a raging mob comprising largely of Trump supporters. They had gathered by the thousands. They broke police cordon at the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. to disrupt the ceremonial counting of votes that confirmed U.S. President-elect Joe Biden's win in the election. Rioters overwhelmed the Capitol Police. They stormed the Congress building. The largely pro-Trump mob tried to interrupt the certification of Joe Biden's Electoral College win. But the interruption threw the U.S. Capitol into a deadly spiral of chaos and violence. Several House buildings had to be evacuated due to potential bomb threats. Vice President Mike Pence was pulled from the Senate chamber, with the situation spiraling out of control. Protesters breached the Capitol building, entering the Senate chamber and streaming through the statutory hall. One man sat in the very seat Pence had been sitting in just a few minutes before, while another posed in Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office. Lawmakers, reporters, staff members sheltered throughout the building as the pro-Trump rioters banged on doors, shouting out slogans.
They're going to stand.
You're filming, you're just to hell with this?
Gunfire was heard inside the Capitol building as police officers barricaded the doors to the House chamber. Police later confirmed one woman was shot, although the specific circumstances of that shooting are yet to be released. The woman reportedly succumbed to the injuries at a hospital. 3 others lost their lives in the violence.
They're going to stand.
You're filming, you're just to hell with this?
Tear gas was deployed and an improvised explosive device was found on the Capitol grounds. By mid-afternoon, the National Guard was called in to help suppress the unrest. Nearly 2 hours after the first reports of that breach, at least 52 people have now been arrested. What unfolded at the Capitol on Wednesday was the result of months of Trump's tweets meant to incite the most violent among his base, with a final clarion call in a speech right before this violence erupted. Listen to what he said.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done and what they're doing. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore, and that's what this is all about.
This unprecedented chaos and violence sent shockwaves across the world. World leaders, NATO chief, Donald Trump's own team members have reacted to this brazen display of anarchy on American soil. Members of the U.S. Congress also called on Donald Trump to stop the rioters. After much chaos and violence, Donald Trump issued this statement.
This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
Joe Biden described the chaos as quote-unquote unprecedented assault of American undertakings. He also said that the authorities struggled to take control of a chaotic situation at the capital that led to the evacuation of the lawmakers.
Let me be very clear. The scenes of chaos at the Capitol do not reflect a true America, do not represent who we are. What we're seeing are a small number of extremists dedicated to lawlessness. This is not dissent. It's disorder. It's chaos. It borders on sedition. And it must end now.
Twitter had to block Donald Trump's official handle for 12 hours. Facebook and Instagram locking his account for 24 hours. Joining us on the broadcast is our correspondent Simon Marks from Washington, D.C. Simon, this was a mob instigated by the president himself. Trump loyalists were encouraged by him to protest. It was only 2 hours after that violence and chaos that he issued that statement, calling the rioters special people, saying that he loves them. Your assessment of what transpired over the last 24 hours?
Well, this is history in the making here in the US Capitol. Molly, there is no question about that whatsoever. A city that has been seismically shocked by the events of the last 24 hours. A country that is reacting with horror to what took place. Waking up this morning to learn that at least 4 people died as a result of that mob invasion on Capitol Hill, unleashed, as you accurately suggested there, by President Donald Trump. He whipped this crowd of baying conspiracy theorists, many of them armed, up into an absolute frenzy in the center of the city yesterday, lying to them not just about the outcome of the presidential election, which he falsely claims was rigged, but lying to them also about the capacity of Vice President Mike Pence, who was presiding over a joint session of Congress at the time, to overturn Joe Biden's election victory. And when Vice President Mike Pence immediately issued a statement saying, I don't have the constitutional authority to do the things that President Trump is suggesting I can do, at that point, the crowd broke into the Capitol building in a bid to bring the proceedings there to a standstill, and in a bid, many of them told reporters at the time, was an attempt to spark a revolution in the United States. They genuinely believed that Donald Trump was telling them the truth when he said the election was rigged against him and Mike Pence was choosing not to intervene to overturn the outcome of Joe Biden's win. And that led to the chaos, mayhem and death that we witnessed on Capitol Hill, with massive questions now about how America picks itself up from this. How does the Republican Party survive, if it can, as a unitary political institution, given the schism that President Trump has now caused deep within it? And most appositely right now, who is currently in charge of the American government? We are seeing, again, a slew of resignations today from the White House. More figures have announced their departure within the last hour. President Trump isolated and alone inside the building, cut off from Twitter, cut off from Facebook, issuing a grudging statement at 4 o'clock in the morning saying that he would observe a peaceful transfer of power, but noting that the election had been stolen from him. Is he still actively exercising the levers of power here, or has Vice President Mike Pence, along with some members of the cabinet, moved effectively to take control of the US government, even if they're only doing that in spirit at the moment? as opposed to doing it in word. I think there are huge questions here about whether President Trump can survive in office for the remaining 12 and a half days of his presidency.
Right. Activists and politicians have also called out the stark differences in how the law enforcement agencies handled the riots at the U.S. Capitol building, comparing them with the response of the police officials to protests against racial injustice last year. What do you make of that comparison?
Well, look, there's going to be a massive investigation as to how it was possible for a group of baying conspiracy theorists in a very disorganized fashion to overrun the police force that protects Capitol Hill. There is a Capitol Police Force that reports to the leadership in the House and Senate, and they suffered an absolute complete breakdown of law and order on Capitol Hill yesterday. It is evident that President Trump certainly did not authorize the use of National Guard to protect the building before the protesters arrived, and even after they were there, a president who proved only too willing to unleash chemical agents against Black Lives Matter peaceful protesters when they were occupying Lafayette Square opposite the White House a few months ago, was resisting calls by Vice President Mike Pence and the congressional leadership for the National Guard to be deployed to deal with violent marauders who at that point were occupying and seizing control of the congressional building. So again, all of this fueling a growing sense among Democrats and some Republicans that President Trump has to pay some kind of sanction for all of this. There are calls for his impeachment and removal from office. That would ban him from ever again seeking public office in the United States. There are suggestions of the possibility that the 25th Amendment to the American Constitution might be invoked that would see Vice President Mike Pence, the cabinet and congressional leaders removing Donald Trump from power. Suggestions of a possible congressional motion of censure against President Trump, but growing calls here for there to be some kind of consequences for his behavior yesterday, which directly led to that siege of the Capitol building.
We're leaving it there for the moment. Simon, thanks very much for joining us with those updates and perspectives. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.